This story happened when I was in my second year of college. The city where my university was located was considered very safe, and it was the first time I had moved there to live with my roommates. The only people who caused trouble in the city were drunk idiots. We lived in a residential area, and there was nothing strange about it. No bad neighbors, no weird vibes. Everything was very calm and quiet. It was really nice living there. The only strange part was that on weekends, only we stayed there. All the neighbors either went back home or stayed somewhere else. So the whole residential area was almost empty, which at first felt really nice. By Monday, when classes started again, everyone came back. We thought that was normal for a college town. The complex where our house was had only 4 other houses, and it was surrounded by trails and farm fields. We loved that place because it was quiet, calm, and far from the chaos of college. Great for studying. From our porch, we could see farms. Other than that, we were pretty isolated. The university was about 20 minutes away by bus, and that was never a problem for us. Because the house was far, the rent was much cheaper. Out of all the girls, I was the tallest, and the only one who had been through scary situations before. Because of that, I was always the one who locked all the doors, windows, and the garage before going out or going to sleep. My roommates grew up in small, very safe towns, so for them it was unusual to lock their own doors. They were also very friendly and trusted everyone. They never suspected bad intentions, until that night. Our plan was to spend the night drinking wine and watching movies. We picked Mean Girls. I loved that movie, and it was kind of our weekend tradition. Pick a movie, order food, buy drinks, and enjoy the weekend. Around 8:30 p.m., we sat on the couch and started watching. Since it was November, it got dark very fast. The only light outside was the porch light above the front door. There was a small window above the door where the light came in, but none of us were tall enough to see through it. So we always checked through the peephole. It took me a long time to convince my roommates to always use the peephole before opening the door. That only happened after one night when one of them opened the door and our neighbor, who was our friend, showed up extremely drunk and threw up at our door. After that, they finally listened to me. A little while after we ordered food, we heard someone knocking on the front door. Jessie joked about how fast the delivery guy was. "Wow, did he come by helicopter?" she said. And honestly, it did feel fast. We lived far from everything, and our food was coming from a restaurant near campus. Also, the knocking didn't sound like a delivery driver. But after a few glasses of wine, we weren't thinking very clearly. It was Val's turn to pay for the food. She was the shortest and the most trusting of all of us. She went to her room to get her wallet and took about 30 seconds. During that time, the knocking continued and became more aggressive. Maybe he's cold or in a hurry, I thought. I told Val to hurry up. The knocking kept getting stronger and stranger. When she came back, I told her to look through the peephole. She went to the door and checked, but she usually couldn't see well through it. When she said she couldn't see anything, we went to help her. Jessie went next. She was usually very funny and joked about everything. But when she looked through the peephole and then looked at me, I knew something was wrong. She looked confused and scared. That look worried me because Jessie loved horror movies, and very few things scared her. "Someone is covering the peephole," she said. Then it was my turn to look, and yes, something was definitely blocking it. The porch light was still on, so I should have been able to see outside. Meanwhile, our other roommate, Anna, came over, trying to understand what was happening. Out of all of us, she was the drunkest. "What's going on?" "Just open the door," she said. We explained everything. Me, Jessie, and Val all felt that something was very wrong. Jessie told Val to check the food app to see where the delivery driver was. That's when we discovered that Val hadn't actually finished placing the order. She had selected the food but never completed the checkout. So the person at the door was not a delivery driver. At the same time, the knocking continued. Anna still didn't believe anything strange was happening and tried to open the door. "Don't open it," I screamed. The moment I screamed, I realized I had yelled loud enough for the person outside to hear. And for the first time, a voice spoke. "This is the police. Open the door. We have a few questions." I became sober instantly. I looked at Val, and her eyes filled with tears. Then I looked at Jessie. She was pale. Anna finally realized something was wrong. The knocking got even stronger, so strong that the door started shaking. Val and Anna went upstairs to calm down and to check if there was a police car outside. They also checked if all the upstairs windows were locked. If someone wanted to, they could climb onto the roof and get into Anna's room because she had removed the bars from her window before. I yelled for the police officer to show his badge. Instead of answering, the man started kicking the door. I told Jessie to call 911 and ask if the police had really sent someone to our address. Jessie was shaking so badly that it was hard for her to dial the number. At that moment, Val came back downstairs and said there was no police car outside. That's when I remembered something strange in what the man said. He said, "We have some questions," not "I have some questions." So he wasn't alone. Jessie must have realized that too, because she ran to the back door to make sure it was locked. It was a large glass door. She closed the curtains so they couldn't see inside. A few minutes later, the knocking started at the back door. Thank God the curtains were closed. Again, I yelled and asked him to prove he was a police officer and at least tell me his badge number. Trying to sound brave and not let my voice shake, I tried to sound intimidating. He responded in a deep voice. "I can't do that." Jessie passed the phone to Val, who was crying while talking to the dispatcher. Now the knocking was coming from both doors, the front and the back. The dispatcher must have heard the noise and asked if someone was trying to break in. Val, desperate, asked if the police had sent anyone to our address. The answer was what we already knew. No. Struggling to speak, Val explained that two men were pretending to be police officers and trying to break into our house. The dispatcher told us to stay on the line and said a patrol car was on the way. Val asked how long it would take and started crying. "Less than 10 minutes, the dispatcher said. 10 more minutes felt like forever. They were hitting the doors so hard that I was just waiting for them to break in. I placed a chair against the door handle and sat on it, hoping it would hold. Jessie grabbed a knife and a fire extinguisher from the kitchen, the only things we had to defend ourselves. One of the men screamed at us to open the door, and at that point, he wasn't even pretending to be a police officer anymore. Then suddenly, everything went silent. The silence was worse than the noise. When it was quiet, we didn't know where they were or what they were doing. If they had forced the back door, they could have broken the glass easily. But they stopped hitting the back door and returned to the front door. I didn't understand why they gave up the easier way, until I remembered the back door faced the street. Maybe they saw a car, or maybe they heard us call the police. Whispering, Jessie said, "I don't think they want to rob us. There are many empty houses here. Why are they focused on the only house with the lights on?" My whole body went cold. I couldn't answer her. Me, Jessie, and Val stayed completely silent, all thinking about the terrible things they could do if they got inside. Suddenly, the dispatcher spoke again on speakerphone, and I almost had a heart attack. She noticed how terrified we were and tried to calm us, saying the police were 2 minutes away. The sirens were off, but the lights were on, so we would be able to see them outside. The men outside sounded desperate. I heard glass breaking, and I turned toward the door ready to defend myself. But it wasn't the door. It was the porch light. I heard a second voice cursing at us. This voice was very different from the first. There was so much hate in it that it scared me more than the knocking. He sounded calm, and that was even scarier. Before, I thought they wanted to rob us. After hearing that voice, I realized they wanted us. I looked at Val in terror. Until then, I had been trying to be brave, but I couldn't pretend anymore. Val looked like a scared little girl, just like me. Jessie was barely breathing. If they came in, I wouldn't be able to protect everyone alone. Then the silence returned. It was so quiet that it sounded like a gunshot when they opened our mailbox. The same man with that creepy voice spoke again. He spoke slowly, stretching every word. Our neighbor had planned a party and had placed an invitation in our mailbox. The invitation had our names on it. In that same calm, dark voice, he read our names out loud and said he would be back. Then everything went silent again. We stayed silent too. We didn't want them to hear anything inside the house. That silence didn't last long, but it felt like forever. The dispatcher told us that the police were at our door and said for us to stay inside while they checked the area. She stayed on the line the entire time to make sure we were safe. Finally, a real police officer showed up. Before knocking, he showed his badge so we wouldn't be scared. The officers asked us to describe exactly what had happened in every detail. We told them everything. They asked if we had seen the men. We explained that they had broken the porch light and blocked the peephole. The porch was covered in broken glass. Apparently, they had pulled the light off the wall and smashed it on the ground. The officers advised us to talk to our landlord and ask her to install security cameras. The older officer closed his notebook, looked at us, and said something that made me realize how much danger we were really in. If any of you were my daughter, I would want a police officer to tell her this. If you can leave this place, leave. They know where you live. They know how long it takes us to get here. And they said they would come back. Then he asked if we heard any vehicle. I hadn't thought about that before. I didn't hear any car engine, only the police car when Val and Anna checked outside earlier. They hadn't seen any car on the street. It was possible that the men were on foot, which explained why the police couldn't find them. The older officer had a look that told me he understood what was happening. He looked sad, which was worse than being scared. We asked him to explain more, and he said that something similar had happened years earlier, but he didn't give details. The officers looked at each other, and one of them said one patrol car would stay in front of our house and the other in the back, so the men couldn't return. We stayed there for 2 more weeks. No one was arrested. If they wanted to, they could have come back. We talked to our landlord and explained everything. She was very kind and owned several properties near the city. She let us move into an apartment closer to campus. 4 months, our old house stayed empty. She installed security cameras, changed the locks, and reinforced the back door. They never came back, thank God. We finally felt safe in our new apartment. But to this day, I still think about that creepy voice. Never open the door until you know who is on the other side. I live with my boyfriend. He is a teacher and works in a city that is about 15 minutes away by train. He gets home around the same time every day. I, on the other hand, work from home. One day, we had a really bad fight over something stupid. I don't even remember what it was about, but it was the kind of fight where you don't talk to each other all day. No messages, no texts, nothing. That afternoon, I was lying on the bed working. It was a Tuesday, and I was almost sure his class ended at 1 p.m. on Tuesdays, so he would be home around 2:30. Around 1 p.m., I heard the front door open and close. I thought, maybe he got home early today, because sometimes he didn't teach his last class. I didn't really react. I was mentally preparing myself for that awkward moment after a fight. I stayed on the bed working and waiting for him to come into the bedroom to change his clothes. The bedroom door was closed, and I was only wearing one side of my headphones, like I usually do when I'm working. Even so, I could hear his heavy footsteps through the apartment. If we hadn't been in the middle of a fight, I probably wouldn't have been so focused on the awkwardness. Maybe I would have noticed how strange it was that the footsteps were so slow and careful. I also might have noticed that he was taking a long time in the living room, but I was only thinking about the fight and didn't realize any of that at the time. I just stayed on the bed waiting. Finally, the bedroom door opened slowly, just a little. I turned my head toward the door and prepared my awkward smile, since we had been fighting for 24 hours. But the door didn't open any further. That's when I saw a woman's hand with red nails holding the doorknob. The person on the other side slowly closed the door the same way she had opened it. Very slowly, without coming into the room. I jumped out of bed, took off my headphones, and stood there for a few minutes without knowing what to do. Then I thought, maybe it's his mom, his sister, or the landlady. For some reason, I convinced myself that it had to be his mom or his sister. So I slowly opened the bedroom door and went into the living room, but there was no one there. And the living room smelled strongly of cheap women's perfume. That's when it hit me. Neither his mom nor his sister had a key to the apartment, and they had never come over. The landlady also never entered without asking first. I went back into the bedroom and locked the door. Now I was starting to feel scared. The bedroom had a balcony, and even though it was raining hard, I went out onto the balcony and called my boyfriend. He answered, and I asked if his sister or his mother had come to our apartment without warning. He said no, and that he was going to call the police. The police arrived 1 minute later and searched the entire apartment, but they didn't find anyone. The strange part was that nothing was missing. We even had a jar full of money right at the entrance. But the person hadn't touched anything. It felt like someone had entered the apartment, gone straight to the bedroom, seen my legs, panicked, and left immediately. Another strange thing was that the front door couldn't be opened without a key. So how did that person get in? For a few days, my boyfriend and I tried to believe that nothing serious had happened and that it might have just been the landlady being nosy. I started to feel safer again. We asked the landlady to change the locks, and when she came with her husband, she noticed something strange on the lock. There was a square area near the keyhole that had been scratched with something. The landlady said someone had used a tool to force the lock and break into our apartment. 1 or 2 days later, my boyfriend said he needed to tell me something, and he asked me not to panic. He told me the kitchen scissors were gone. Of course, I completely freaked out and searched the entire apartment, but I couldn't find the scissors. This whole story is really bizarre and scary. Someone breaks into your home, doesn't steal anything, not even a jar full of money at the entrance, takes a pair of scissors, goes into the bedroom, sees someone lying in the bed, and leaves right away. I was 10 years old and downstairs late at night watching TV with my mom and my sisters. Eventually, everyone decided to go to bed, and I ended up staying downstairs alone. I was starting to fall asleep when suddenly someone began knocking on the door very hard, really hard. I got scared and just sat there, staring at the door like my life depended on it. My dog was lying next to me and stayed completely still too. He didn't bark or move, which was strange because he always barked at the door. The knocking continued, and for me it felt like it lasted about 5 minutes. I looked at my dog, and maybe because I moved, he finally stood up and ran toward the door, but he still didn't bark, just tilted his head, confused. I finally got the courage to stand up and open the blinds to see who was at the door. It was a young woman, maybe 20 or 25 years old. She was blonde, white, and covered in blood. Her shirt was torn and her hair was a mess. In my mind, she had been beaten or had been in an accident. So I decided to open the door for her. But as soon as I unlocked it and started to open it, my mom appeared out of nowhere, grabbed the door, slammed it shut, and locked it. I had no idea she had come downstairs and was behind me. I was so focused on the woman at the door that when my mom closed it, I suddenly realized I should never open the door to strangers in the middle of the night. My mom put her hand on my shoulder and pulled me away from the door. She shouted asking who was there, and the woman on the other side shouted back, saying that her boyfriend had beaten her and that she lived across the street. We lived in a townhouse. The townhouses were on a dead-end street, and our building was at the end of the curve. The house the woman pointed to was very far from ours. My mom asked her name, and it was something like Bethany or Stephanie, something like that. I noticed my mom hesitated to open the door, but after the woman screamed again asking for help, my mom opened the door. She stepped outside and left the door halfway open. I opened the door and went after my mom just to make sure she was okay and to understand what was happening. The woman thanked my mom and asked to come inside because she was afraid her boyfriend would come back. My mom said no and explained that she couldn't let her inside because there were 4 children in the house and her priority was our safety. But she said she would sit with the woman outside. Then my mom told me to grab the phone and call the police, which I did. My mom started asking what had happened and asked the woman to say which complex she lived in. The woman pointed to a specific complex and gave the house number. A short time later, an SUV stopped in front of the house. The woman ran toward the car, saying it was her sister, and got inside. She left without saying anything else. We never saw or heard the so-called sister. We just stood there looking at each other. I asked my mom about the police. She said she would wait for them outside in front of the house. She told me I could go upstairs and sleep if I wanted, but I decided to stay with her and wait for the police. I was really scared, and I wanted to stay with my mom to make sure she would be okay. The police arrived, and my mom explained what had happened. The officer told her she did the right thing by not opening the door. They also said they had received other calls like that in the same area. The next day, we went out to do some shopping and passed by the complex the woman said she lived in. Of course, the house was empty. No one lived there. So in the end, don't open the door. You might really regret it.